J. Dave, hello. I am primarily a stamp collector, but I'm interested in other collectibles, for example, Irish and British coins. Now, there's a huge nostalgia factor here. For the first 2 decades of my life, in the 1950s and 1960s, Irish and British coins were already centuries old, pounds, shillings, and pence. But in February 1971, both countries adopted a decimal system. And this meant that many coins disappeared or were in some way adopted for the new system. And this meant that the coins in my pocket as a boy and as a teenager were now no longer in circulation. And I suppose it's a basic fact of collectibles that nothing is really collectible until it disappears from general use. Now, I do say Irish and British coins quite deliberately because I was brought up in Belfast in the north of Ireland, and as such, Irish and British coins would often be in my pocket. Irish coins were accepted in local shops, as indeed British coins were accepted in shops in the Republic of Ireland, but Irish coins were never accepted in England, Scotland, and Wales. Now, in this video, I want to look particularly specifically at British coins. Now, although coinage goes back thousands of years, the only British coins I would have had in my pocket were the copper coins of Queen Victoria, Edward VII, George V, George VI, and Elizabeth II. Now, there were no coins, so far as I know, minted for the very short-lived reign of Edward VIII. Now, the halfpenny, halfpenny, and penny were known as copper, and they would be available in all 5 reigns. Threepence, my favourite coin, and the higher coins were only available in the reigns of George VI and Elizabeth II. Now, the reason for that was that earlier coins, round about the start of World War II, silver coins were actually withdrawn because they were actually that silver. These coins are some kind of alloy, not real silver. And by the way, I've included a coin called a farthing here, which was effectively already obsolete when I was a child. I never actually seen one in real life, so to speak. Now, typically, I am talking about a year like, say, 1963, when I was 11 years old. It was fairly unusual to see a Queen Victoria coin. And usually when we did, my friends and I held on to the oldest one we had. It was a kind of a game we played. Now, obviously, after decades of use, these became very faded. In a lot of cases, it's almost impossible to make out that Queen Victoria is actually portrayed. And I suppose when they got back to banks held on to them. Now, in terms of currency, we had a £1 note, £5 notes, and above. But obviously, as a child, I rarely saw anything above a £5 note. In terms of coins, we had halfpennies, we had pennies, we had threepenny bits, we had sixpences, we had shillings, we had florins, which were more usually called simply 2 shillings, and we had a half crown, which was 2 shillings and sixpence. Now, there was actually a coin called a crown, which was 5 shillings, but I never seen any in real use. They were sometimes used at weddings and things like that. Now, of course, the rest of the world was already decimal. 100 sous in the French franc, 100 cents in the American dollar. So this made Irish and British LSD, pound, shillings, and pence complicated for foreigners. But of course, for school children, it was the only system we knew and we understood it. Now, the system itself, there was the pound note and there was also a 10 shilling note. Don't have one here. There was no £1 coin. And the coins themselves, well, this is a shilling. And there were 20 shillings in a pound. And this is a florin, 2 shillings, and there were 10 of these in a pound. 240 pennies made a pound. 12 made a shilling. And incredibly, 480 halfpennies made a pound. Obviously, 3 pennies made a threepence, and 2 threepences made a sixpence, 2 sixpences made a shilling, and 2 shillings made a florin. And typically, 2 shillings and 1 sixpence made a half crown. But I think there is a context. Understanding coins involves knowing what we could actually buy with them. Well, in 1963, the average industrial wage was £15. And my uncle and aunt actually bought a newly built 3-bedroom house for £1,100. But to an 11-year-old child, what would that mean? Well, as part of being an altar boy team for a wedding, we hoped for 10 shillings. Now, there was 4 of us in a team, and getting 10 shillings meant half crown each, 2 shillings and sixpence. Or if just 3 of us turned up for the wedding, that would mean 3 shillings and fourpence. And what could we buy? Well, a bar of chocolate this size would probably have been around sixpence. Plastic toy soldiers, such painted ones, such as these, would probably have cost sixpence each, and unpainted ones probably threepence or fourpence. Now, I don't think we had cans of Coca-Cola in 1963, but we did have small bottles. And if I remember correctly, a small bottle of Coke would have been less than a shilling, probably around tenpence or something like that. And a dinky car, now this is a replica, it's not dating from that time, but typically a dinky or corgi car would have cost maybe 2 and threepence through to about 4 and sixpence or something like that. Now, to put this in context, in 2020, this chocolate now cost 16 shillings. The Coke, a small bottle of Coke would cost around about £1.50. And I didn't mention cigarettes, but certainly around 1963, they would have been about 1 shilling and tenpence for 10 cigarettes. I have no idea what they are now, because I just don't smoke. I have absolutely no idea. Now, the change over to decimal currency, that happened in 1971. We still had the pound note, but we no longer had the 10 shilling note. That was replaced by a 50 pence coin. Now, in the last few years, we've had £2 coins introduced, and I'm not showing any here, but £1 coins were introduced sometime probably in the 1980s. Now, at the time of the changeover in 1971, it was anticipated that it would be a very difficult transition, particularly for elderly people. But my recollection is that it went very smoothly. There was, of course, lots of publicity um, in advance, but like I said, my recollection is that it wasn't that difficult. Now, the unit might have remained a pound, but there were 100 pennies to the pound, and the other coins were 2 pence, 5 pence, 10 pence. These are actually smaller than the originally introduced coins that were reduced in size sometime later. The 20 pence was introduced at a later stage as well, and 50. Now, at training courses, we were encouraged to play around with the new coins. So we quickly learned that, say, 4 2 pences and 2 1p's made 10p, and so on. It was actually a lot more smooth than we thought it would be. Thank you for watching.